Good afternoon, welcome to America Decides. We're bringing you updates on what has been happening in the past week on that front. Well, believe it or not, Donald Trump has been given a reprieve. A New York Court of Appeals has blocked the $454 million settlement that Donald Trump was due to pay this Monday. And if he hadn't paid that money, they would have begun seizing his assets to make up for it. However, the appeals court had ruled and lowered the bond that Trump was expected to have posted all the way from $454 million to $175 million. And further, he also extended the due date by 10 days. So that's some breathing room for Donald Trump. Very welcome news. But the fact still remains that if Trump comes up with the revised amount for the bond payment, it will guarantee an appeal hearing, warding off any attempts by the state of New York to seize his assets in order to defray his multi-million-dollar debt. It will be recalled that a New York court found Donald Trump and his business empire liable for corporate fraud last month, slapping them with nearly $500 million in damages. So this is where we are now with that particular issue. So Donald Trump getting more time to make that payment. There's also news that he's trying to gather money from other places. His social media network that he formed also has gone public, earning a bit more on his side. So hopefully he's able to come up with that. We can only wait and see what happens with it. So that's on that particular side. But how's the race looking like between him and Joe Biden? So we do have some graphics to show you, and we can have that up now, where according to a recent poll released by Gallup, Joe Biden has a lower approval rating than any of his predecessors at this point in their first term. Biden continues to struggle in the polls, especially in the battleground states, where his successes are crucial, or his successes, I beg your pardon, are crucial to his re-election chances. There's also a CNN poll that has Trump ahead of him in Michigan by 8 points. And if you know the terrain, Michigan is very critical to the success of any presidential electoral contest in the US. And the poll suggests a dead heat in other battleground states such as Pennsylvania, where both candidates have won on their respective paths to the White House. So remember when Trump became president, he had to win Pennsylvania. When Biden became president, he had to win Pennsylvania as well. So these are very critical states. This is where the polls are with that. If you look at the graphics and all of the polling that has taken place, you'd realize that there's a very, very graphical representation of this particular state of the race. So now that we've caught up with that, we continue with our weekly exploration of issues dominating the election cycle. A number of issues have come up already, and we'll try to go deeper into them. The first one is Professor Sean Perry-Giles of the University of Maryland, who has spoken previously on other issues. But one of the major issues she has touched on is something that we can identify with here in Ghana as well, which is the challenges that females, or the hurdles that females have to face when participating in leadership contests or in American politics. This is an issue that has come up here as well, and let's listen to Professor Sean Perry-Giles of the University of Maryland. She's the department chair of the Communication Studies Department there in College Park. Let's listen to her. And what do you think are some of the major hurdles that they have to negotiate, especially because of how they frame themselves, the language they use, the rhetoric? I know there's an issue about the double blind in female politics and all of that. What are some of these things and how they can?
Well, historically, politics were seen as the sphere of men, and that women who got involved in politics, like in the 19th century in the U.S., were really debased. And so the suffragists, for example, were treated as if they were men and treated as if they were crazy. So you still see a legacy of that somehow women are trespassing into this masculine area. And certainly that's changed, but not at the presidential level. And I think on one hand, women have to show that they're politically sophisticated. But if Hillary Clinton faced this, she was very politically sophisticated and knew the issues inside and out. But then she was branded as not likable. Nobody liked her. So then she had to show that she was likable. And if you show you're likable, then it seems like you're being disingenuous. Like, are you a policy wonk who is very hardcore politically focused, or are you trying to show that you can have conversations and be like one of the women who's at a coffee club? You know, it's like that doesn't, those seem irreconcilable. And ultimately, one of the things I've studied most is the role of authenticity in American politics, and women are usually judged as inauthentic. And I think partly because of the history that women have not historically been seen as political leaders, and because they have to be these things that men don't have to do. You don't hear as much about men and their likability.
Sure.
Whereas political women are often dubbed as unlikable.
So that was Professor Sean Perry-Giles, University of Maryland, College Park Department of Communication. In addition to this, there was a conversation that we had with Professor Gloria Ayi. She's at the Harvard University at the Kennedy School there. So she also spoke on the state of racism. Professor Gloria Ayi, Harvard University, speaking on state of racism in the U.S.
Generally, people have been really concerned about the state of racism in America,
Sure.
especially in the Obama era. There was this whole notion of the end of racism or the post-racial era, but it looked like it has only gone up, to some extent. What would you say is your own assessment of the state of racism in the U.S.?
So it really depends on how we're trying to assess levels of racism. Whether we're looking at institutional racism or structural or systemic racism versus more overt depictions or expressions of racism from perhaps individuals. What I would say is that in decades past, it became more inappropriate and unacceptable to express overt racist attitudes just publicly. But we've seen a regression in recent years, in the past few years, in for that issue specifically, where you can see some elected officials blatantly spewing racist ideologies. We do see that happening. Also, with social media and
So that was Professor Gloria Ayi at the Harvard University speaking on a few emerging issues such as racism in the U.S. It's going to be a major topic coming up in this election, especially with the rhetoric coming out from the side of Donald Trump and the Democrats seeking to make some capital out of that as far as minority narratives are concerned. So we'll be looking forward to how this pans out throughout the race as well. So this brings us to the end of our weekly roundup on what's happening on that side as far as politics in America is concerned. We will come your way again next week with further updates on events happening on the American elections. For Joy News' HSC Kanku for America Decides.